I want you to picture a Russian nesting doll. You know the vibe. You pop open the big painted wooden doll, and there's a slightly smaller one inside. You pop that one open, and there's an even smaller one.
I love a good metaphor to kick things off. But, I mean, usually when we talk about mental health, we're only looking at that tiny doll in the middle, right?
Exactly. We focus almost entirely on the client. Or maybe we zoom out just one layer to see the therapist working with the client. That's the visible relationship. That's the TV drama version. But today, I want to know, who is the big doll? Who's helping the therapist?
Ah, the classic question. Who heals the healer? Or maybe, who manages the manager?
Right, because today we are doing a deep dive into what feels like the hidden engine of the mental health profession. We're looking at Chapter 11, Consultation and Supervision. And I have to be honest, when I first saw that title, I thought, okay, paperwork and bureaucracy. But this is actually about the safety net that keeps the whole profession from, collapsing.
It is so much more than paperwork. It's the meta level of counseling. It's acknowledging a really hard truth. No counselor is an island. You can't do this work in a vacuum. You need a mechanism for advice, for growth, and, frankly, for someone to tell you when you're messing up.
And to anchor us, I found this definition in the source material from a researcher named Fall way back in 1995. It's so simple, but it covers everything. He defined this whole field as me and you talking about them with the purpose of some change.
It's deceptively simple, isn't it? Me and you talking about them. But the devil is totally in the details because the me and you change completely depending on whether we're talking about consultation or supervision.
Okay, so let's break that down. We've got two main buckets to fill today. First, there's consultation, which is sort of like the expert dropping in to fix a specific problem. And then there's supervision, the intense ongoing mentorship that every counselor has to go through.
And you'll want to stick around because in the second half, we're going to get into some honestly mind-bending psychological stuff that happens in these rooms. Things like the parallel process, where the therapist unconsciously starts acting like their client.
That part legit blew my mind. But let's start with that first bucket, consultation. So how do we distinguish this from just therapy or just having a boss?
Think of consultation as the specialist drop-in. It's a voluntary relationship. It's when a professional, the consultant, invites another professional, the consultant, to help with the work problem. And it is not personal counseling for the staff.
Okay, so if I'm a school counselor, and I'm great at talk therapy, but I have a student with a really complex behavioral disorder that I just don't get.
You might call in a behavioral specialist.
Right.
That's consultation. You're admitting I have a gap in my knowledge, and you bring in someone to help you bridge it. But the fascinating thing is how this role has evolved. I mean, over the last 80 years, it's changed massively.
Yeah, the text took us on a little history trip.
Uh-huh.
Back in the 40s and 50s, this looked very different.
Oh, yeah. It was the direct service era. Back then, the expert would swoop in, fix the problem, and leave. It was like calling a plumber. You don't watch the plumber fix the sink, you just want the sink fixed. The consultant would diagnose the issue, maybe even treat the patient themselves, and the staff didn't really learn anything.
So they weren't being taught to fish, they were just being handed a fish sandwich.
Precisely. And that's fine for plumbing, but it's bad for mental health systems because the next time a similar problem comes up, the staff is just as helpless.
The text mentions a specific turning point for this 1963, the Community Mental Health Centers Act. Why was a piece of legislation so critical?
This was a massive moment. Congress poured federal funds into creating mental health centers all across the U.S., but here's the kicker. For the first time, they wrote consultation into the law as a required service. It legitimized the idea that prevention was just as important as treatment.
So the goal shifted. It went from fix the patient to
fix the system, exactly. It became process-oriented. The goal was to help the staff understand why the problem was happening so they could handle it themselves next time.
Okay, so if I'm a consultant walking into an agency today, do I just start bossing people around? Because the source material outlines a few different models, and some of them sound, well, a little aggressive.
It really depends on the context. The text draws a line between consultant-centered and consultee-centered models.
Break that down for me. Consultant-centered sounds like the I know everything approach.
It can be. It's the doctor-patient model, but for an organization. I'm the expert, I diagnose what's wrong with your agency, and I prescribe the fix. Do X, Y, and Z.
That sounds efficient, but maybe not very popular with the staff.
Well, it's not really about popularity, it's about crisis management. If a suicide hotline is failing or a school has a violence outbreak, you don't want a collaborative brainstorming session. You want an expert to say, Here is the new protocol. Implement it now.
Fair point. But if the building isn't on fire,
Then you usually want consultee-centered consultation. This is a collaborative. The belief here is that the staff actually has the answers. They know their clients best, but something is blocking them. Maybe it's a lack of confidence, maybe a blind spot, or just office politics.
there was a great case study on this in the text. An administrative director hires a consultant because morale is low, billing is down, people are just unhappy.
Right. And notice what the consultant did not do. They didn't just walk in and give a motivational speech.
No, they went full detective. They interviewed the medical director, the clinical staff, but they also interviewed the secretaries and the janitorial staff.
That detail is so crucial. Why the janitor? Because in a system, sometimes the person emptying the trash bins hears the conversations that the CEO never hears. They feel the vibe of the building.
That's the whole systemic nature of it, right?
Yeah, exactly. The consultant realized the problem wasn't that the staff was lazy or bad at their jobs. It was that the medical staff and the administrative staff were speaking different languages. The blockage was communication. By fixing that, the billing and morale improved naturally.
So that's consultation. The expert drops in, unblocks the system, and leaves. But now let's move to that second nesting doll, supervision.
This is a different beast entirely. If consultation is a first date, supervision is a marriage
A marriage with a lot of paperwork.
and a power dynamic. Supervision is ongoing, it's intense, and this is the key difference. It is strictly evaluative. A consultant can give you advice, and you can ignore it. A supervisor is the gatekeeper. They have to sign off that you are competent to practice.
And they're responsible for the client's safety, right? Even if they aren't in the room.
That is the heavy burden of supervision. The supervisor is legally and ethically on the hook for the supervisee's clients. But beyond that legal stuff, there's this fascinating concept of the homeostatic mechanism.
Throw a rock into a pond.
The ripple effect. The idea is that counseling is a system. If the supervisor helps the counselor grow, helps them be more patient, more insightful, the counselor takes that growth into the session with the client.
And then the client takes that growth home to their family.
Precisely. A good supervisor changes households they will never even visit.
Yeah.
But, and here is where it gets really interesting. Ripples can go both ways.
This brings us to the parallel process. This was my absolute favorite part of the reading because it feels like a magic trick, but it's actually psychology.
It is the biggest aha moment for most new counselors. Parallel process is when the dynamic between the client and the counselor gets unconsciously mirrored in the relationship between the counselor and the supervisor.
Okay, we have to use the story of Juan and Carla from the text to explain this. It illustrates it so perfectly.
It really does. So set the scene. You have Juan, a counselor in training, and he has a client named Suzanne.
Suzanne is having a terrible time. She's having panic attacks, her marriage is on the rocks, she's working full-time, and she feels totally helpless. She comes to Juan and basically says, please, you have to save me. I can't sleep. I can't function.
Right. High anxiety, high dependency. She is dumping all that chaos onto Juan. Now, look at what happens to Juan. He tries to help, but he starts feeling stuck. He goes to his supervisor, Carla, and what does he say?
He tells Carla, I feel inadequate. I can't find a solution for her. I'm obsessing about it. I can't sleep.
Do you see the mirror? Suzanne can't sleep. Juan can't sleep. Suzanne feels helpless. Juan feels helpless. Juan has absorbed the client's anxiety like a virus and is now acting it out with his supervisor. He is looking at Carla saying, fix this for me, just like Suzanne looked at him.
It's like he's reenacting the crime scene without even realizing it.
Exactly. And the trap here is, for Carla, the supervisor, if she isn't careful, she will start feeling anxious and helpless too. She'll try to rush in and save Juan, giving him all the answers.
Which is exactly what Juan is trying to do for Suzanne.
And if Carla does that, she reinforces the helplessness. The whole system fails.
So how does she break the cycle?
She has to recognize it. She has to say, wait a minute, why am I feeling so anxious? Why is Juan acting so dependent? Oh, this is Suzanne's anxiety. She has to model the calm competence that Juan needs to show Suzanne.
So she stays calm, she empowers Juan, and then Juan goes back and empowers Suzanne.
Ideally, yes. It's emotional reverse engineering.
That is just wild. It really highlights that being a counselor isn't just about reading a textbook. It's about managing your own internal state.
Which brings us to how counselors actually learn to do this, because the text makes it clear. You don't just wake up one day and know how to handle parallel process. There are stages.
Right. The Integrated Developmental Model, or IDM, it basically maps out the journey from newbie to pro.
It's a journey every professional recognizes.
So, level 1, the anxious beginner.
We've all been there. High motivation, but massive anxiety. Level 1 counselors are very self-focused. They are sitting in the session thinking, am I doing this right? Did I say the right word? What does my face look like? They aren't really hearing the client because they're so worried about their own
And
performance.
they love the teacher role from their supervisor. They just want the script.
Just tell me what to say. Yes. Very dependent.
Then comes level 2. The text calls this the teenager phase.
The messy middle. This is actually the hardest stage. They've learned enough to realize how complex therapy actually is. Their motivation fluctuates. Sometimes they feel great, sometimes they want to quit. And just like a teenager, they oscillate between wanting the supervisor's help and wanting them to back off. I know what I'm doing. Wait, no, I don't. Stop telling me what to do.
And finally, level 3, the professional.
This is where the integration happens. They understand the client, but they also understand themselves. They are willing to try new techniques without freaking out. They treat the supervisor more like a consultant, a peer they can bounce ideas off of.
The source material also mentioned Bernard's discrimination model, which I thought was interesting because it talks about the different hats a supervisor wears to help counselors get through those levels.
Yes, a supervisor isn't just a boss. Sometimes they are a teacher literally saying, here's how you do this technique. Sometimes they are a counselor asking, how is your own anxiety affecting this session? And sometimes they are a consultant saying, let's brainstorm options together.
A good supervisor knows which hat to wear in which moment.
There was one other technique mentioned in the how-to section that sounded, honestly, terrifying. Kagan's interpersonal process recall, or IPR.
Watching the tape.
Yeah, watching a recording of your own therapy session with your supervisor sitting right there.
It is vulnerable, but it is one of the most powerful learning tools we have. In IPR, you watch the tape and the supervisor holds the remote. They pause it at specific moments and ask really deep, somatic questions. What were you feeling in your stomach right then? What did you wish you had said? Did the client remind you of anyone? It seems like it's about forcing you to say the quiet part out loud.
It is. It's about unlocking the unsaid thoughts. Because often, the things we are afraid to say in the session are exactly what the client needs to hear, or at least what needs to be addressed to move forward.
Now, we have to pivot to the serious side of things. Because when you have this level of vulnerability, watching tapes, talking about feelings, there are power dynamics. And there are risks.
Absolutely. The text talks about supervisory resistance. Because you're being evaluated, it's natural to get defensive. But there's a very strict line we have to walk. We call it the crossover.
This is the idea that supervision isn't therapy,
You
right?
say, correct. Supervision can feel therapeutic. It can be cathartic, but it cannot become therapy. If a supervisee has deep personal issues, say a past trauma that's being triggered by a client, the supervisor can point it out, but they can't treat it.
Why not? If they're a therapist, why can't they just help?
Because of the power dynamic. You can't be someone's therapist and their boss. It's a dual relationship. It's messy and unethical. They have to refer the supervisee to their own therapist.
And then there's the legal liability. We mentioned the Tarasoff decision briefly, but let's hit that again. This is scary for supervisors.
It is high stakes. The Tarasoff decision established the duty to warn. If a client threatens violence, the counselor has to act. But here's the kicker. If the counselor is a supervisee and they don't act, the supervisor can be held legally responsible.
Even if the supervisor never even met the client.
Yes, it's called vicarious liability because the supervisor is responsible for the supervisee's practice. That's why supervisors are so rigorous about documentation and safety plans. They aren't just being bureaucratic, they are betting their license on your judgment.
The text also mentioned a modern twist on all this, cyber supervision, which I guess is just
Zoom supervision.
pretty much. It's great for access, especially for counselors in rural areas who might not have a master therapist nearby. You can get supervision from an expert 1,000 miles away.
But you lose the room. You miss the body language, the shifting feet, the tension in the air. It's harder to build that deep trust required for things like parallel process work when you're staring at a pixelated screen. Plus, confidentiality becomes a nightmare. You have to be sure no one is listening on either end.
So we've gone from the drop-in consultant who fixes the billing department to the deep, ongoing relationship of the supervisor who helps you navigate your own anxiety and become a pro.
And the common thread is growth. The entire meta-level structure is designed to make sure that as you help others, you are constantly being sharpened yourself.
Which brings us back to the Russian nesting doll. Even the biggest doll has someone around it.
Right. Even expert supervisors often have their own consultation groups. The learning never stops. It creates a safety net of knowledge so that no one, not the client, not the counselor, has to go it alone.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave our listener with a thought that struck me while reading about the ripple effect. We talked about anxiety trickling up, the parallel process where Juan got anxious because Suzanne was anxious. But the text briefly mentions a reverse parallel process.
Yes. Empathy trickling down.
Right. If a supervisor is kind, patient, and understanding with the counselor takes that feeling and passes it on to the client, and the client passes that kindness to their family.
It's a beautiful thought. It means that how we treat the people we lead or mentor has consequences far, far beyond that immediate relationship.
So for you listening, whether you're a therapist, a manager, or just a friend, think about that ripple. If you offer someone patience today, who knows whose dinner table that patience lands on tonight?
That's a powerful place to end.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you next time.